Okay, well, tonight I have a treat because I have someone who's going to introduce our speaker. And before we get to Christian, I want to introduce you to someone else. So in the tradition of having expert voices at the forum, it only seemed fitting that we include a guy from Illinois to address election integrity. I mean, where else can you find such an impressive record of corruption, from the Chicago machine to the 4 former governors who are comfortable in orange jumpsuits, right? That's really quite an impressive record. Tonight, we're partnering with the Federalist Society to offer the floor to Christian and our next speaker. And these guys know a lot about how political sausage is made. Hat tip. It's not pretty. So Christopher Hagee is the passionate chairman of the Silicon Valley Lawyers chapter of the Federalist Society. Prior to moving to California, he led the Chicago Lawyers chapter of that organization for a decade and has hosted hundreds of legal experts on a wide variety of subjects. He was the vice chairman of the second largest election commission in Illinois and has been involved in election management and ballot security for many years. Chris worked for the Environmental Protection Agency during the Trump administration and currently serves as the general counsel for Mivium, am I saying that correctly, Chris? Mivium Industries, a semiconductor startup here in California. Please welcome Chris Hagee.
Thank you very much, Jane. I met 2 of those governors that went to prison. That was interesting. One of them's a fraternity brother. My job tonight, though, is to introduce J. Christian Adams. I've known Christian for many years. He's spoken several times at our events in Chicagoland, and I'm really honored that he's joined me out here in California. Me permanently, but he's just visiting and will be returning to a lovely red state later tonight. So, Jake Christian serves as the president and general counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. He previously served in the United States Department of Justice in the voting section from 2005 to 2010. I think he'll share with you why he left that august position. He litigates election law cases across the country in 28 states and the territory of Guam. He brought the first private party litigation resulting in the cleanup of the corrupted voter rolls under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. This is an ongoing problem, which I'm sure he's going to tell you more about. And in that capacity as a private attorney, he's represented multiple presidential campaigns in their election litigation. But he's also an author. He serves as a legal editor at PJ Media. I hope you've seen pjmedia.com. I recommend it if you have not. It's a wonderful internet news publication. Christian has been on Fox News several times, and his writing appears in National Review, Breitbart, The Washington Examiner, The American Spectator, The Washington Times, and other publications. So you can tell you've really got a guy who's known for this expertise in this particular area, and that was specifically recognized by President Donald J. Trump when he appointed him to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity that it was established in 2017. And currently, he's also on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about that role. So currently, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the Public Interest Legal Foundation. Without more, Christian will tell you about some of those anecdotes, I hope.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate that. Indeed, Chris has escaped. It's not often somebody comes to California and the place they left was more corrupt. But in your case, I guess it was. Indeed, I am currently on the United States Commission on Civil Rights. It's a presidential appointment. President Trump appointed me to that also. And it's kind of ironic because I think that I will be the last Trump appointee in the federal government. Now, you might say, why would you be the last one? What about all the other ones? Well, the Biden administration has been firing them all. right? Getting rid of them, like Naval Academy Advisory Board and, you know, FTC, all these other presidential appointments by Trump, they're getting fired. But they can't do that to me. It's really weird why. In 1985 or thereabouts, President Reagan fired the entire U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, like my organization, right? All the commissioners were fired because they didn't like him. So what happens next? Tip O'Neill and all the congressional Democrats, they go to Congress and they pass a law that says the president cannot fire the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. So President Reagan firing everybody and Tip O'Neill's reaction is now probably, believe me, they do not want me on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I can promise you, because we have a 4-4 deadlock, right? So they have to listen to us to get anything done. There has to be fairness, right? How about that concept, right? So my term runs through 2025, and I think that I will probably be the last Trump appointee in the federal government. I think, God willing. So I'm not supposed to mention it prominently, though, that I'm on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. We have a rule. The commissioners are not supposed to prominently mention that they're on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. So if you're watching this video, trying to figure out how prominent my mention was, there's much more to come that has nothing to do with the Commission on Civil Rights. Okay, so what are we going to talk about tonight? If you saw the billing of this event, it talked about child voting, which I know everybody said that doesn't happen. Wrong, I'll get there. The dead voting, which all of you said that does happen, right? And also how the election really was manipulated, in my view, and what happened in 2020. I'll try to deconstruct that. And I'll also try to share with you what's going on in California on some issues and walk through what's happening nationally on elections, okay? So if you have questions, I think you all have cards you can pass in, and they will eventually get to them. I thought I would start, hold on, with this, and just leave this up on the screen for a little while. It'll get there, don't worry. And I thought this would be a nice appetizer once it appears. No signal. Not supposed to work that way. There we go. Okay. This is a gravestone. I took this picture, by the way. I'm the photographer. And I'll tell you this story first before we get into the meat of my talk. And I'm afraid to put my laptop, my pad down. There we go. So, the Public Interest Legal Foundation has been compiling the voter rolls from all around the country into a single database, right? This is what the Presidential Advisory Commission that President Trump appointed me to was going to do before the left suited out of existence. So we just said, we'll do it. So donor support, it's not easy to do. You have to go harvest all these voter rolls. And then we began to bounce the voter rolls against commercial data, against credit data, against Social Security Death Index. We compared them between states to see who's voting twice, who's registered twice. Oh, and you'll see some people are registered far more than twice. We'll get to that. So we sued the state of Pennsylvania in 2020, Public Interest Legal Foundation versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for having 25,000 dead individuals on the voter rolls, on the active voter rolls. 25,000. This was before the 2020 election. And here comes the CLE part for the lawyers in the room. And there's more CLE, not just this. So we were in federal court in Harrisburg, and we were using the National Voter Registration Act. Everyone here knows it as motor voter, unless you're under the age of 40, and then you have never heard of it. Okay, 1993, you remember Bill Clinton, motor voter, first thing they passed in Congress. You go to DMV, you get registered to vote. And as you will learn tonight through evidence that I'll put up on the screen, that motor voter is causing non-citizens to register to vote in this country. And I will show you the evidence, so just stay tuned, it's there. It's not a big lie or any of these other terms I use, it's real. So, back to Pennsylvania. We found 25,000 dead registrants on the active voter rolls, including this lady here. What was curious about this particular instance is notice the date that she registered to vote, 2020. She registered to vote in 2020. She didn't just vote in 2020, she registered to vote in 2020. Now that raises some really fascinating issues for an election lawyer like me, because it means there's documents. And if you're in the world of law, you know documents are really good things to have. So we went and first of all, we eventually gave all this information to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and said 25,000 dead people are registered. Well, that's why we're suing you. And we had a hearing 3 weeks before the election. And the Public Interest Legal Foundation asked the federal court under motor voter, because there's an enforcement provision of that law that I'll talk to throughout this talk, I'll mention throughout this talk, that a party can go in and sue if they're aggrieved because the rolls are not being maintained correctly. That's basically what's called the cause of action. Gives us standing, and we've litigated this, we have standing. Happy to talk to the lawyers in the room more about this, but we have standing, it's established. And we had the court hearing, little inside war story here. We had the court hearing in federal court, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania lawyer stood up and said, Your Honor, their data is so suspect that they're even arguing that people are registering when they're dead. So you can't believe their facts, because that's just preposterous, right? And you know what, here's a little secret. I was sort of sitting in the hearing going, kind of is. Like, I was worried about our data, right? I was like, oh my gosh, have we, because guys, one of the things I'm going to tell you, our side has got to get this stuff right. We got to get this stuff right. And there's a lot of wrong that's been promulgated the last 2 years, okay? So one of my themes, one of the Public Interest Legal Foundation's themes, is we got to work to get it right as far as an evidentiary matter. So I was kind of nervous. The judge was skeptical. He said, you know what, that sounds right. That doesn't sound right, that's possible. It makes me question your whole data set. Ugh. And when you're a litigant and you hear that, and you know you've just lost your preliminary injunction motion. Because the judge is not going to grant you an injunction. And all we are asking for, by the way, as a remedy, as relief, is to segment off all of these deads. So we at least maybe do something a little extra when they come to vote, just to make sure it's them. We weren't asking for them to be disenfranchised. Just do something more than nothing. That's all we asked for in the remedy in the PI hearing. But we lost the PI hearing. The judge did nothing before that Pennsylvania election in 2020. And what happens next? Judith Presto votes. Judith Presto voted. Now, she's been dead, as you can see from her gravestone, since 2013. That's in a veterans cemetery, by the way, outside Pittsburgh, that I went, and you can look up where the graves are of veterans. And I just took these pictures. So, shortly thereafter, there was an interesting article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It said Judith Presto's husband had been arrested. How about that? Her husband was arrested because, in fact, he registered her to vote in 2020 and voted for her. Now, I tell this story not only because I have a photograph that I can show you that this stuff is real, but also to give you a sense of the heavy headwinds our side faces. When you come up with the evidence, when you present it in court, when you find pictures of the gravestones, federal courts, the media, state election officials don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. Because after all, the dead don't vote unless maybe they're named Judith Presto. That might be the only one in the whole country. And you know that's not true. So one of the things we do at the Public Interest Legal Foundation is take advantage of federal and state laws to try to get this nonsense taken care of. That's what we do. I got to tell you, you're in California, and it's bad. You guys, your state, I should say, comes up with all the bad ideas, right? And I'm going to talk about some of that tonight. Like, they're incubated here. They're incubated here, and you have a lawless state government that doesn't do anything about the problem. Give you one example. Help America Vote Act, CLE moment again for the lawyers in the room. Help America Vote Act of 2002. Remember Palm Beach County? Mess. Congress responds. They pass something called the Help America Vote Act. Some people call it HAVA. Okay, it's a federal statute, governs what states do. It's a federal mandate. And one of the key parts of that federal mandate, the most important part in my view, was that every state had to implement a statewide database of voters. Now, before HAVA, Los Angeles County had their database. Santa Clara County had their database. San Diego County had their database. of who the voters were, the voter rolls, right? Guess what? They never talked to each other. So you could be registered in Santa Clara County, and you could be registered in San Diego County, and Los Angeles County, and all the other counties in between, and nobody would know. And it was like this all over the country. All over the country. So what HAVA did is required every state in 2002 to implement a statewide database. And what it does is it amalgamates all the voter rolls so you can see if people are registered multiple times. It allows the state, it actually requires the state government to investigate if they're dead. Get the dead people off the rolls, get the duplicates off the rolls, and do a variety of other things I won't bore you anymore about. Well, here comes the best part. 2002, this law passes. Guess who the last state in the country was to implement the statewide database? Of course, it was California. That's the easy one. Anyone to guess how long it took?
20 years.
Well, 20 years would be now, so that's a little bit of a tricky answer. It's like Price is Right. You can't go over on that one, can you? It was about 15 and a half years. And the Justice Department, when I was at the Justice Department, and both under Bush and Obama, kept giving California waivers. And so you guys didn't get a statewide database here until just a couple years ago, where every other state in the country pretty much did it overnight. They did it within a year or two. So it was this weird deliberateness, this lackadaisical attitude toward complying with federal law in California. There's just one of many examples I could share with you tonight. I was at the Justice Department in the voting section from 2005 to 2010. And I began to see up close how people in power, and when I came out of the Justice Department in 2010, the story sounded outlandish when I would go on book tours and stuff and say, the people of the Justice Department don't enforce the law equally, and half the room would look at you like, that guy's crazy. Now you all see, right? Now you all see. And so when I left the Justice Department because they dismissed one of my cases, which is a case against the new Black Panther Party, it was a group of Black Panthers standing in front of the polls with weapons, nightsticks, but hey, they hurt, wearing their paramilitary uniforms, shouting racial slurs at Cracker. We got a default judgment, and for those lawyers in the room, that means you won. But then the Holder administration ordered us to dismiss the case after we got a default judgment, which, you know, doesn't happen very often, but it did in this case. So I got subpoenaed by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Oh, it's a night of irony, isn't it? So the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights subpoenaed me to testify about why the Justice Department dismissed the case, and the DOJ said, don't comply with that subpoena. In fact, there's a criminal provision in the subpoena law for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. If you don't comply, it's actually a crime. And in an even greater dose of irony, the Justice Department said, don't worry about it. We won't prosecute you for not complying with the law. Right? Welcome to the age of Obama, which has now become the permanent age of Obama, hasn't it? Where lawlessness is on the streets. So I left the Justice Department and I went out on my own and I testified in front of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, on which I now sit. So that's the strange story that Chris had mentioned that I would probably tell tonight. So let me give you my view as to what happened in 2000. Let's shift a little bit back to the law, to the elections, and less away from politics. Two big things happened. Two big things happened. And I saw it coming in March of 2020. I wrote about it, actually. We learned, a couple of us election people in Washington, Hans von Spakovsky at the Heritage Foundation, Scott Walter at the Capital Research Center, the three of us learned that Mark Zuckerberg and other tech gurus were about to dump $500 million into the election. And what were they going to do with that $500 million? They were going to tell state and local election officials how to run their offices. That's the essence of the 2020 election. Zuck bucks is what we now call it. This is the single biggest thing that happened in the 2020 election, bar none. The single biggest thing, because it turned the urban core into turnout machines. So people would say, well, Trump got a greater percentage of the African American vote. Well, so what if Detroit went up 70,000 votes? You see? Well, the Republicans won everything else in the country, House elections, Senate elections, State House. How could Trump have lost? Because of Zuck bucks. Zuckbucks was the mechanism by which they defeated Trump, period. It was the single most important part of the 2020 election. Here's how some of it worked, just to give you an example. Let's go to Philadelphia. The Philadelphia city election budget was $9 million before Zuckbucks. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, through a charity called the Center for Technology and Civic Life, which previously had a budget of about $600,000, got $400 million through Zuckbucks. Okay? They gave Philadelphia $10 million. What happened with that $10 million? Oh, and other C3s did too. We'll just leave them out for the moment. They bought planes to circle Philadelphia saying, vote early by mail. They bought bus billboards, radio campaigns, oh, only on certain radio stations, not on country music stations. They bought radio ads, get out the vote. They sent people door to door, city employees that were deputized so they could collect the ballots legally. And they went door to door collecting ballots in Philadelphia. And strangely, Philadelphia had the greatest rate of undervoting, which means only one election was marked on the ballot and the rest of them were left blank. It's called an undervote. And why is that? Because there was only one election they cared about. So this, and by the way, this repeats itself all over the country. Detroit, Lansing, Phoenix, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Madison, Milwaukee. Starting to see a pattern here? Where $400 million poured through city election offices to get out the vote machines. And it worked. And in the old days, we called that a bribe. If you paid an election official to tell him what to do, and he does it, that's called a bribe, isn't it? Where's my semantics wrong on this? But not now, it's not a bribe. Now it's just helping people vote. Now it's just mitigating the effects of COVID. Now it's just serving the underprivileged to help them exercise their franchise. You see how they control the language on this? But what it did is it turned these places into turnout machines, and with that alone, Trump lost. That alone. It did not require anything else. Now, but let's talk about the anything else, because that also happened. All over the country, cases were being filed. Cases were being filed to suspend laws. Suspend laws. Remember, how do we get election laws? Forget about California. That's a bad example. Let me talk about some of the more sane places. Virginia passes a law that says mail ballots have to come in on election day, or they can come in 3 days late as long as they have a postmark. That's a law. The legislature, elected by the people of Virginia, passed that law, and a governor who was elected by the people of Virginia signed that law, and we had consensus, didn't we? That's how law works in a rule of law, when you have rule of law. Everybody buys into it ahead of time. You know the rules of the game. Park Place is no longer worth $5,000 because my 12-year-old says it is, in the middle of a Monopoly game. A first down is no longer 15 yards in the second half for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You play by the rules in a nation built on law. But that didn't happen in 2020 because of COVID. And so all over the country, and I could do the roster, the laws were being suspended like something out of a third world country. Executives were issuing edicts to suspend the laws in America. And so what happened all over the country in the name of COVID and the fact that by God we can't follow the rules in an emergency sound like other countries you've read about in history? Like, oh my gosh, there's an emergency. Let's get rid of the basic principles. All over history we know these stories. But in America it came to us in 2020. And we suspended the rules. So for example, in Virginia, you didn't need a witness signature to cast a mail ballot. In Pennsylvania, you could bring in bundles of ballots that before only a family member could deliver. In some states like Virginia, oh, let's go back to that case I told you about. Who cares about the 3-day postmark requirement? We'll just suspend that law by edict. And I'm not exaggerating. This was the State Board of Elections in Virginia issued an edict that said that law is suspended and ballots can come rolling in for days after the election with no postmarks. Think about that. With no postmarks, days after the election. They suspended the law, just like a third world country. So what did I do? I found a plaintiff. His name is Thomas Reed. He's an election official in the Shenandoah Valley. And the Public Interest Legal Foundation represented him for free, and we went to court, and we argued that in Virginia you can't suspend the law, that this is a state with a deep history of rule of law. In fact, the Virginia Constitution has something called the anti-suspension clause. How about that? It was written by George Mason, one of the founding fathers who authored the first version of the Bill of Rights. And we put that right in our brief, that the Virginia Constitution, by the way, this story is a happy ending, so nobody despair. We put it right in our brief that the Virginia Constitution says you can't suspend the bloody laws. It's right there in the Constitution. And the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia stood up in court against me. I was the person arguing, and said those are quaint little historical notions. That's their exact words. That it does not reflect the complexity of a 21st century election. Pure progressivism. Pure progressivism. And so, thank God the law was on our side, because we won. And a judge enjoined the Commonwealth of Virginia, in the case of Reed versus State Board of Elections, and said, you've got to follow the law. Now, did that happy ending happen in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Iowa, all the other places around the country where the law was suspended? No. So that's the second key element to the story of 2020. First one was Zuck Bucks. Second one is we behaved like a third world country. And we suspended the law. Okay, so some happy endings. Let me try to give you a glimmer of something positive out of this story from another era. People have caught on to it now. You guys understand it, I think. Okay? Politicians understand it. High-powered lawyers understand it. Federal judges understand it. A whole team of lawyers like me understand it, and we're not going to let it happen again. We got blindsided by something we couldn't understand. But, thank you. But rust never sleeps. And if there's any Neil Young fans in the room, you know what I mean. But it also means something else besides a Neil Young album. Rust never sleeps, and they never quit. So I'm going to talk to you now about, we're shifting gears, about some of the other crazy things they're up to. I mentioned in the title of this talk, it's about child voting. Okay, now all of you think I'm making this up. I'm not. And they're thinking about it in San Francisco, by the way, for a school district. But they've already passed it in Maryland. And in Maryland, children in 6th grade are allowed to vote for a school board member. Oh, isn't that nice, so many people say. Oh, isn't that nice? And usually they don't pay taxes, the people who say that. So in Maryland, a child from 6th to 12th grade can vote for one school board member. This is true. Everything I'm telling you is not a farce, I promise. I'm putting them on as like the comedy portion of the talk. No, this is all real. The teachers' union effectively nominates the 3 possibilities, okay? The student runs on the student body councils. Anybody seen Reese Witherspoon in the movie Election? Okay, it's like that kind of election. Like they're voting for a government official, though, not for Reese Witherspoon. Like somebody with power as a government official, and they pick a school board member who sits on the school board in Howard County, Maryland. We're suing them, by the way, under a 14th Amendment theory that those 20,000 school board members, children in the schools, get a school board member. Meanwhile, because of redistricting principles, which I'm not going to bore you guys about Reynolds v. Sims and all these one person, one vote cases, but when you have congressional seats, you basically have to have equal population, right? Or your state house, equal population from one seat to the next. Well, here, 20,000 students get one seat, like 120,000 adults get a seat. So it's actually diluting the voting power of adults, the child voting, the child school board member. During COVID, the school board of Howard County was considering reopening schools. And I don't need to tell you what happened next. And that child was the deciding vote to not reopen schools. So this is all very deliberate. This is not just sort of some whimsy that they've come up with about child voting. There's actually organizations dedicated to this called Child Voting Initiative. Voting free of age discrimination is what they call it. And I'm telling you, it's coming here. And the ultimate goal is to get the voting age down. Because they know when they get the voting age down, that the policies will resemble child dreams more than reality. Okay, that's coming next. Aliens voting. Public Interest Legal Foundation is suing the city of New York. DeRoy Murdoch of Fox News is our client. I don't know if you know DeRoy. He's a black conservative. I've got 3 other clients. They insist I call them black. I've called them African American. I get scolded. I'm just saying. Descendants of former slaves, 2 of them, progressives. And 1 is a Democrat. So DeRoy, 2 progressives and a Democrat. We're suing New York because they're allowing aliens to vote. And guess who that hurts? It hurts African Americans in New York City. Oh, I'm sorry, DeRoy, black. Okay, because racially polarized voting exists in New York. Tends to be Hispanic versus black in primaries. Tends to be Asian versus black in primaries. And that hurts black voting power when you bring in all these non-citizens. And by the way, it's under the 15th Amendment. It's a constitutional claim. But let me share with you what one of our clients says, Phyllis Coachman, who is part of descendants of freed slaves. She says, my ancestors busted their tails for like 140 years to get the right to vote. Like a whole bunch of bad stuff happened to them. And these guys are coming in and getting the right to vote after nothing. 30 days in the United States. You can be a foreign national of communist China and get to vote in New York City under this. Isn't that nuts? I told you, this is not the farce section of the talk, even though it might sound like it. Okay, so I've got some nice visuals for you all to show you. We've seen the first from Phyllis Coachman. Aliens are voting now in California, and the Public Interest Legal Foundation has been dredging information around the country for a long time to figure out what this number is. No academic has ever studied this. You'd think it's a neat topic for a political science professor, right? How many foreigners are voting in American elections? Ought to be a topic at the political science conference every year, right? Someone ought to get their PhD and teach it at Stanford or Harvard or nope. Because we don't want to talk about that. The monkey with like the, right? See no evil. So how are most foreign nationals discovered on the voter rolls that we have found at PILF? It's this. In order to get your green card in the United States, you have to fill out a form, and question 12 says, have you ever registered to vote? And if you have, you need to get unregistered. So what happens then is all these people who got registered to vote, it's also behind you, that got registered to vote, suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get this cleaned up. So this is the letter that you get from INS. Now here's the best part. You guys, you're going to think this is a stand-up night, right? Because this is so crazy, funny, nuts. Foreign nationals are getting to register to vote even after they tell election officials they're foreign nationals. Oh, that's made up, says the left. That's the big lie, say the skeptics. Let me show you the proof. Oh, I've got stacks of these. I'm not going to keep you here for 12 hours to go through the stack, but here's a couple. This is from New Mexico. Every federal voter form under Motor Voter has the citizenship checkbox question. It says, are you a U.S. citizen, yes or no? Okay? It's by federal law. It has to be on there. And the National Voter Registration Act mandates that. Here's one from Michelle F., last name redacted, from Hatch, New Mexico. Doña Ana County, we did some work there, that's how we found this. Are you a U.S. citizen? No. Okay, well that's just one, right, Mr. Adams? Nope, here's more. New Jersey, are you a U.S. citizen? Nope. Carlos Gamarra from Pleasantville. Here's more, New Jersey. Are you a U.S. citizen? Nope. All of these got registered to vote, by the way, in case you missed that. These are all people on the voter rolls. And they're telling election officials, I'm not a U.S. citizen. More. Somebody named Tarachi, Bergen, New Jersey. Are you a citizen? Nope. Registered vote. Oh, wait, look on the lower right. Oh, sorry. Here's a little evil villain story. This was done by a third-party registration group called the Voter Participation Center, otherwise known as that group that tries to register your pet dog. And they're mailing out voter registration applications to aliens who are then dutifully filling it out, telling the truth. I'm not a U.S. citizen, and still getting registered to vote. More. New Jersey, Sean something or other, voter participation project. Are you a U.S. citizen? Where's that checkbox? Number 2. Are you a U.S. citizen? No. Welcome to the voter rolls. Now, you might say, oh, but Mr. Adams, purveyor of the big lie, they're not really voting, are they? Let's take a look at some evidence. Here's one from San Diego County. Mr. Cortez, who dutifully told everybody he was from Mexico, if you notice, place of birth Mexico, and somewhere in here there's a citizen checkbox. There's his voting history on the left, or I'm sorry, the right-hand side of the screen. That's his voting history in the state of California for this non-U.S. citizen. It's one of the most important slides you're going to see tonight because it explains a lot what's happening to your state. 1992 general, 96 presidential general, gubernatorial 98, 2000 presidential primary, 2000 presidential general, 2002 gubernatorial general, 2003 statewide special. That must have been that recall you had with the Terminator and this predecessor. Presidential general, that's John Kerry, and then 2006 gubernatorial general. The citizen from Mexico named Mr. Cortez, who lives in Bonita, California. Not the only one, I have more. And again, I could go on for hours with you guys with these slides. County of San Diego, this is to confirm that Mr. Redacted Gonzalez resided in Escondido, was registered to vote in 2000. He registered to vote in 2003, and here's his voter history that was canceled in 2016. Presidential elections, gubernatorial elections. Now do you see what's happening to California? This is happening over and over and over again. And this is the evidence, by the way. You know, there's no proof of voter fraud, writes the New York Times on a macro. Like they have a macro. No proof of voter fraud, they just hit Control N. Like every writer at the New York Times and all the publications have the macro. Some of you watching on TV, on the stream, you have the macro. And then we see what reality is. More. Mr. Redacted Clay, canceled in 2015 because of non-citizenship, even though he voted for president and governor twice. More. County of San Diego, Mr. Redacted Santofagia, caught in 2014 after voting in, it looks to me like 9 general elections, primaries. Okay, so let me go back to that. So here's the problem. This is total breakdown. And this isn't just happening in California, it's happening all over the country. We're finding records like this all over the country. Why hasn't any newspaper gone and sought these same records out? Oh, wait, we all know the answer to that. That was a rhetorical question. Because that's not their job. Their job is to pretend this doesn't exist. Their job is to pretend that Mr. Redacted Santofia is not voting in American elections. But we can see from government records that he is. By the way, if it wasn't clear, these are government records. These are not records my staff did on Word. These are actual government records we receive from the County of San Diego. Again, I ask the question, why is no other academic or newspaper asking for these same records? Okay. That's the bad problem that explains a lot with what you all are living with. Let me show what's happening all around the country. I call it bad hygiene. And we just sued the state of New Jersey 2 weeks ago under motor voter, the same NVRA law, for having duplicates and dead people. And I'm going to show you some of the evidence that doesn't exist, right? This is all part of the big lie. Just warning, big lie warning. There are tens of thousands of New Jersey voters that have crazy dates of registration, like the 1800s, all born on January 1st of 1800. Now, you all laugh, and it is a little funny, but what does this really mean? Does this mean they're all 250 years old or whatever? No. It means that when Alexander B. Rowe or Scott Burgess apply to vote a second time, but that never happens. Wait, just wait. Stay for the whole speech. okay? When Alexander Bureau applies to vote a second time, you can't figure out it's the same guy. You have to have good data to know that people are trying to register to vote more than once. And it's not always deliberate, by the way. As we just saw, there's third-party registration drives. So here is a bunch of New Jersey people born, I think, during, would this be the Adams administration? Yes, this is during the Adams administration. Okay, some New Jersey residents were born during the Byzantine Empire. Some, if you look carefully, were born in the future, 2029. Oh, this is the big lie. No, 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 these are government records. Now, this doesn't mean fraud, writes the New York Times, or any of the reporters who hear me, but it means that it's a mess on the voter rolls in New Jersey, because you can't tell who's who. There's someone born in 1893, someone before the Battle of Hastings, just before, okay? These are from the voter rolls in New Jersey. Now, remember I said that nobody gets registered more than once, right? That's part of the big lie, right? If you say that people are registered more than once, you're crazy, right? I'd like you to meet Mr. Rashawn Slade of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Mr. Slade didn't get registered once, twice, 3 times, even 4. He got registered, as you'll see in a moment, because we got the actual government records of his registration. These are the forms he filled out. These are the forms that Rashawn Slade filled out right before, I think, the 2016 presidential election, in the space of about 3 weeks. Right there. Big lie, big lie. No, no, no. Government records. I'm sorry you can't see it so great, but Rashawn Slade registered 7 times. 7 times active registrations, which we only discovered when the Public Interest Legal Foundation sued Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh, and discovered that this was occurring. 7 times. Now, think of what you just saw and start thinking about what vote by mail means to this. Vote by mail. And when you start doing automatic vote by mail, like New Jersey, California, Oregon, what do you think Mr. Rashawn Slade gets in his mailbox 7 times? See, this isn't rocket science. This isn't complex to understand. Why has no reporter written about this? Because they don't want to. They don't want to. It's not just Pennsylvania. Let's meet Mr. William Widener of Gloucester County, New Jersey. 4 active registrations. Oh, and by the way, I'm just once again giving you a scratch of the surface. These are a sample of what I could spend, literally, we could be here till tomorrow showing you slides like this. So Mr. Widener got registered 4 times. If you look carefully, because you're a skeptic, you look at the voter ID number, that's what's different. Voter ID is different. That's the individual number that each person has. And strangely, he's registering all around the same time, which is also peculiar. I don't know why this happened. I don't have the secret on this one. Okay, let's take it back to California. One of the problems is that people are being registered in multiple states, and they're voting twice in multiple states in the same election. Oh, but of course, you guys know the drill by now. That's part of the what? The big lie, right? Well, let's put some meat on the bones. So this is currently under investigation by the Attorney General of Arizona. It's an individual by the name, well, I won't say the name. And we don't have any idea if this guy did anything wrong. Let's be super clear, okay? These are just government records I'm showing you. Registered to vote in Lompoc, California, and also Bullhead City, Arizona. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that the Arizona record actually has an out-of-state address. So he's registered in Bullhead City, but told the election officials, I also have an address in Lompoc, California, and of course, voted twice in the 2020 presidential election. We'll see where that goes, under investigation. Another one, in case you thought that was the only one. Lake Havasu City, and here's my convenient out-of-state address in Chico, California. So somebody who is registered to vote in Arizona, is also registered to vote in Chico, California, and loves to vote so much they voted twice in the same election. All right, more. Alpine, California, and Yuma, Arizona. I think that might be the last one. It is, but I'll leave it up. So folks, I hope if you took anything out of this talk tonight, a couple of things. The other side knows where the vulnerabilities are in the election. I've tried to give you a taste of them tonight, what some of them are. One of the things we're doing at the Public Interest Legal Foundation is trying to plug the holes, trying to go after states that are doing really bad things. States that register Rashawn Slade 7 times. States that allowed Judith Presto's husband to register and vote her. States that suspend the laws regarding postmarks and ballots coming in. We can only do so much. And there's other groups out there trying also to do this. But the key to this to understanding is there is a machinery out there that is being manipulated, sometimes deliberately and sometimes accidentally, and sometimes you don't know where the line between the two of them are. And the 2020 election, if there was anything positive that came out of that, it's the fact that people like you woke up to this fight that's taking place behind the scenes. That was part of the Justice Department fights going back to redistricting and the new Black Panthers and all of these fights about process. Well, you guys were out just being regular Americans, right? You guys were just working your jobs, building your lives, while these activists were creating these messes and then exploiting these messes and then telling you you're crazy to think the mess exists and crazy if you think these are real slides. That's probably what's next, is someone's going to write a story that Christian Adams put up a bunch of fake documents. Okay? That's called libel, by the way, if you're thinking about it. But these are real problems. And in the America that I grew up in, everyone would have cared about this. Everybody, Democrat, Republican, old, young, black, white, whatever. In the America I grew up in, when you showed Rashawn Slade gets registered to vote 7 times, nobody's skeptical or critical. They're like, oh my gosh, how do we fix this? Nobody in a newspaper would have written a story attacking the person who told them about Rashawn Slade. It was a different country because we cared back then. And I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight because you guys care. And it reminds me of what this country used to be. Thank you very much.
Anyway, I'm really excited because I just had this insight. I thought, your voter, what is his name? Rashawn?
Rashawn Slade.
Rashawn. Finally, I understand why people want us to use the pronoun they. Right? For one person, now it makes complete sense. Okay. All right. Well, while we collect some questions, we have a couple of ones that have already been submitted, and one of them is about Bill Barr, and he said that anybody who thinks the election was stolen is a kook. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, this gets into this word game that is I hope you can hear me. Are we live? Yep. I was at the Justice Department in the voting section, which we had authority over all federal election laws that were civil, more or less. But I got to tell you about a guy named Richard Pilger. Richard Pilger is head of the Election Crimes Branch of the Criminal Division. I need an organizational chart of DOJ for you guys, but I was in the Civil Rights Division voting section, and over here is the Criminal Division Election Crimes Branch. They were 2 different units of the department. The man who ran the Election Crimes Branch was a guy named Richard Pilger. He's been in the news a bunch, one, because he resigned when Trump did a bunch of stuff after the election. And of course, he's back. He didn't really resign. He just moved out of his office. He's still a GS-15, probably making $170,000 a year with life insurance, health, and all the other perks. You guys are paying for his retirement. Any federal employees know you get a high 3 at your 3 highest pay grade. You get, he'll make a lot of money when he's retired. Richard Pilger is part of the problem. And I went on Judge Janine, who I think you had here at one point to speak. I went on Judge Jeanine's show repeatedly during the Trump administration saying you got to get rid of Richard Pilger because he's the bottleneck on everything related to voter fraud. Every single voter fraud case the DOJ has to go through Richard Pilger. And he's a partisan left-wing Democrat. And I had to deal with his fallout when I was the DOJ. He wouldn't prosecute voter fraud, period. That's why there has not been but 2 voter fraud cases out of the DOJ since 2009. One was a non-citizen voting prosecution in North Carolina. One was a similar one in Texas, and they just indicted a former congressman in Philadelphia last week for literally stuffing the ballot box in Philadelphia, an inner-city Philadelphia congressman. Okay, so 3 now, I guess, voter fraud prosecutions since 2009, all because of Richard Pilger. Back to Bob Barr. Bob Barr would have been taking his on-the-ground assessments on what was happening on the ground, and I don't know what those assessments were, but he would have been getting them from Richard Pilger. And in the department, there's a hierarchy that each unit has jurisdiction over certain things, and Richard Pilger had jurisdiction over voter fraud. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Barr was being told that the entire apparatus of the federal government found there was no voter fraud because of Richard Pilger, who should have been fired and never was. And find the clips of me on Judge Jeanine on Fox News. Jeanine and I worked it out. It's like we said the name Richard Pilger like 20 times during the hit because we were hoping the president or the people would hear it and get rid of the guy. Well, those chickens came home to roost, didn't they? Because they didn't get rid of the guy. And I think Bob Barr deserves a bit of leeway because of the structure of the DOJ and who would be reporting information to him. And he doesn't have a way to get information outside of that pipeline that's viewed as credible inside the DOJ. You guys can all say, you're a swamp creature, get off the stage. Right? I get that. I'm just trying to stir the pot a little here. Okay.
You mentioned something about standing. You said political parties have standing. And there's a question about the status of the Zuckbucks thing. Who
Right.
has standing? Can anybody sue him?
Unlikely, but I'll tell you about 2 lawsuits we did on Zuckbucks. There have been failed lawsuits. There's one in Michigan got dismissed in March. When Florida, a bunch of states banned Zuckbucks, by the way. That's one of the positive outcomes of the 2020 election. Florida, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Iowa, South Carolina, I'm forgetting some others. They banned Zuckbucks. They realized how corrupt it was to allow private parties to pay for government election offices. I mean, it's like, oh, look, what's next? Like, let's benefit the judiciary, and Tony Soprano's going to fund the judiciary. I mean, this is why we have bribery statutes, don't we? It's so the appearance of impropriety does not exist. So it turns out Palm Beach County kept some of the money. This is Florida, kept a lot of the Zuckbucks. So we sued Palm Beach County to disgorge them, CLE moment, to make them get rid of the money. And we sued. We were found to not have standing, which goes to your question, but they quickly got rid of the money. So we viewed it as a win. We did the same thing, I think, in Harris County, Texas. But standing's real hard on this. It's really hard, meaning who's allowed to sue to stop this? Our theory was let's test it out and see if we could sue to stop it. And in the end, we got where we wanted to go. So.
Okay, question about bribery. Are the state election officials being paid off, and were the federal judges in the states that suspended the law bribed?
No, the judges were absolutely not bribed. And I'll share a hearing with you in a minute with Norman K. Moon that I was in on. Back to the state election officials. Look, this is much more sophisticated than just straight up paid off bribery stuff. This is 3-dimensional chess where they're saying, hey, what is it you need, Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State of Michigan? Oh, we think we will advance enfranchisement if we buy this system and do this and that and all that. So it doesn't look like bribery because it has a good purpose, right? Look, I know it's a laugh line. The night has been full of them, although nobody laughed at some of them. Okay, to the judges. Okay, there was not a judge being paid off on this. I'm telling you, I was in a hearing with Norman K. Moon, United States District Court, Western District of Virginia. The case was brought by the League of Women Voters, I think, which, by the way, in case nobody knew, that is not a nonpartisan organization. Like, my life's mission is to make sure everybody knows that. They sued Virginia to get rid of the witness signature requirement, okay? And, of course, the Commonwealth of Virginia didn't defend because they were in league with the League. So the Republican Party intervened, we intervened to try to defend the state law. And I had a hearing with Norman K. Moon, and I'll never forget what happened in that hearing. And I teach my young lawyers this, younger lawyers. The Republican Party of Virginia was trying to argue to the federal court that COVID was not that serious. That was the basis of their argument. That you didn't need to suspend the witness signature requirement because we have a doctor's affidavit. Judge Norman K. Moon, who's probably in his late 70s and probably has a wife in her late 70s, was having none of it and was outraged at the argument because he was clearly afraid of COVID. And so you don't have to be bought off to rule the way they were ruling. You just have to be human and afraid. And that's clearly, in my opinion, what happened in that case. And there were many cases like it, but I just want to share that one war story.
We keep bringing up lawlessness, and there seems to be a lot of that. The question from the audience, HAVA requires regular maintenance of the statewide lists, including ineligible voters. Then why doesn't the Department of Justice enforce this? And even the Republican administrations don't enforce it.
Right, this is a great question. I love this question. Because I wrote a book about this, right? It's called Injustice. I asked Chris to take it out of my bio, but the book is called Injustice. You get like, it was a New York Times bestseller. But the answer is essentially this, and this is a fascinating topic, and thank you whoever asked that question. Help America Vote Act of 2002 has a requirement that states maintain accurate voter rolls. It does not have a private right of action. It does not have the right for anybody to sue to enforce that. That was deliberately kept out of HAVA, because I know the people who did it, and I give them a hard time every time this question comes up. Hey, Hans. And they kept it out of HAVA because they knew who would use it, was the ACLU and all the other left-wing groups. Because groups like ours didn't exist in 2002. There was nobody doing this until PILF started doing it and some other groups. But we're the only public interest law firm in the country dedicated only to election integrity. We're the only one. And so the Help America Vote Act has no private right of action. Now the National Voter Registration Act does. Here comes a CLE moment, guys. The Help America Vote Act allows the Attorney General, and I'll answer that question in just a minute, to sue to clean voter rolls. And it has a strict liability standard. Any of you who have taken torts know what I mean. If you've got a messed up voter roll, you're liable. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993, in contrast, has a private right of action. We just got a $116,000 fee award against the state of Illinois last week. It has an attorney fee provision even. It has a private right of action under the older law, but the standard is reasonableness. Oops. Private right of action, reasonableness. No private right of action, strict liability. Okay, this is a law lesson. I'm sorry for everyone else in the room, but we are giving CLE credits. We are, seriously. Some people will apply for CLE credits. So that's the problem. Now, the remaining question on the table is why doesn't the Attorney General do anything? And now, of course, I mentioned my book, but here's the summary. The unit of the Department of Justice that would enforce it is filled with radical left-wing hostile lawyers who don't want to enforce it. And when Obama won election in 2008, 09 was the transition, and I wrote about this in the book, Julie Fernandez, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, came to the voting section and told us we weren't going to enforce HAVA or any of the voter roll cleanup stuff. That was done. No more cases. All of the conservatives who got hired during the Bush administration, like me, were gone by the time Trump took office in the voting section. The incoming Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Eric Dreiband, the Senate confirmed Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, who could have said, do something about this, was captaining a ship called the USS Mutiny. There was nobody in the voting section who was willing to sign the pleadings. And just fire them. That's the laugh line of the night. You can't fire them. You can't fire these federal employee lawyers. You can't do it. So Dreibend is there, Eric Dreibend, the Assistant Attorney General, Senate confirmed. He has a Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General. I can see him. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He's at Jones Day. John Gore. And he's got like 2 or 3 other attorneys in what's called the front office. It's the political office over the Civil Rights Division. So there's like 5 people and 895 enemies in the Civil Rights Division. That's how many lawyers and staff work in the Civil Rights Division, 800. Okay? Average salary about $150,000. And so what are these 5 people going to do about HAVA? You have to have someone go investigate the HAVA complaint, right? You can't just like allege that there's a HAVA violation. Nobody's willing to do that. So that's why, and by the way, and during the Trump administration, Donald Trump thought it'd be great to have a hiring freeze. So guess what? We didn't get to hire any conservative lawyers who might have done this. And so now you're stuck with at least 3 more years of non-enforcement.
So how do you see the future of the courts when you look at the legal profession as you just described them?
Well, remember, that's only the legal profession working for the administration. The legal profession generally...
According to your friend to my right over here, Chris, it's not... It looks
Okay, well,
grim.
I didn't want to despair the crowd too much. I'll say this. The elite law schools have become absolute academies for hardcore progressivism. And any conservatives who come out of those elite law schools have Stockholm Syndrome, where they're trying to like appease their jailers. And so, look, Washington is full of these kind of lawyers. Anyone who's worked there knows, like these Harvard law grads who might be a little bit conservative, but like to make the other side like them. And so these days, the best lawyers are, in my view, from like SEC schools. You know, LSU, South Carolina, that's me. I'm biased on that, but they were taught law. They learned how to argue cases, not... I did an article once. I got to update this article. It's really fun read at PJ Media. Do they teach law at Harvard anymore is the headline.
That's a great title.
Yeah, and I went through the course catalog, and oh my gosh, the story wrote itself. It was all about like sex and drugs and witchcraft, and I mean, it's like none of it had to do with law. It was all progressive ideology, and those people then get to Washington hired by big firms, by Supreme Court clerks, probably one who leaked something recently, and they are out there to transform the world. And that's what we face. So, thank you.
So we just had an election out here and a primary, and it said that we set a record for lowest voter turnout. I'm not sure if that's completely accurate, but it very well might be. So who's voting, and why weren't the conservatives out to vote?
Look, I am not an authority on California politics, okay? But you raise an interesting point. This is an important thing to understand. Obviously, primary elections are always low turnout. That's understood, you know, compared to generals. But the progressive left thinks that if only everybody voted, if only turnout was at 99%, then we would have our utopia, right? That's what drives so much. They have this idea that there's these proletariat that are disenfranchised. And then if they only rose up against the bourgeois at the ballot box, they would get all of their progressive dreams. Now, I think Trump kind of disproved that, by the way. I do. I think it might be the opposite, actually. If everybody voted, it would be the mainstream American culture that would win. But the low turnout in California, I can't account. Now, there's probably a lot of demoralized people. But I don't know enough about the particulars of California politics to really answer that.
Okay. There are a lot of questions about the movie 2000 Mules. So do you want to address the movie?
Have not seen it.
Ah.
Sorry.
I would recommend you do.
Look, all the places I've been traveling, it's hard to find time to... You know, I'm friend with a screenwriter at Hollywood. You guys may know he's from California. He fled California to go to Nashville. His name's Roger Simon. He's been nominated for 2 Oscars. He writes at Epic Times now. He's a really good writer. And I'm reminded, that question reminds me of Roger because I'll often send him an email and say, Roger, I just saw the most awesome movie, you got to see it. and he'd go, "You're reminding me of work." And so when it comes to my theater choices, it's probably going to be Top Gun more than it is 2,000 Mules right now.
Okay. Well, we hear that's pretty good too.
So,
Okay. So can you keep going a little bit more?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So somebody says, please explain the video we saw in the Georgia election of officials pulling ballots from under suitcases after the press left.
Well, I wish I could. I know that that has somewhat played out. I know some of the people who worked on that closely. I know there's libel lawsuits associated with that video that caused me to tread very carefully in answering this question. Because I think people in the video are otherwise now known as plaintiffs. And so I think the story of that video may be told out in litigation to come, and I just don't know the answer to it.
Do you think it's possible that the election could be decertified, the 2020 election, and what would it take? What evidence would it take?
Okay. There is nothing I'm more certain about answering tonight or saying tonight than what I'm about to say. There is zero chance. There will be a civil war of epic violence if that happened. And I'm not afraid of the left, trust me. Meaning, I've been putting up with this crowd for a long time. I'm not saying that out of fear. I'm merely describing there's no legal mechanism to do it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that's not like I'm advocating that outcome. I'm trying to be predictive. I'm trying to be a crystal ball, not an advocate. Okay.
Okay.
These are great questions, by the way.
Oh, good. What are your thoughts on the current vulnerabilities with the voting machines and the VBM infrastructure?
Right. Okay. I'll tell you what I think the ideal voting system is, and then we can work our way backward. I used to monitor elections for the Justice Department. What does that mean? I would have to go stand in a stinking hot Mississippi polling place during an August primary. I'm like, can you guys please move these municipal primaries away from August? Because I would be in Mississippi, and we do monitoring in Florida and Arizona, all during these incredibly hot months. And so I would get up. Guys, I'm gonna be the wailing complainer for just a minute. The federal employee who complains. But you guys need to understand this, because this is what goes on all over the country for federal elections. So a DOJ team would fly in, and this still will go on, into an area before the election. They've monitored San Francisco, San Diego County I've been at, all over California, Arizona, Texas, Mississippi, Boston. I did Boston elections, Detroit, Philadelphia. The team would go in a couple days in advance. They'd set up shop in a hotel, usually one that had a really good concierge lounge. Okay, very important when you're on the DOJ team to have a party. I'm not kidding. And then on election day, you'd show up like at 4 in the morning because you had to document if the polling place was all set up correctly. And you had DOJ OPM, their Office of Personnel Management, federal employees who would come and be sort of the scriveners who would stand there all day and write. And they would fill out these federal forms that were literally this thick with that old-fashioned, like, multicolored paper that would write through. Okay, and so you did this all day long. The polls would open at 6. You'd work till 8 in the polls, standing there watching. And then the fun really begins, because as the attorney, I would have to be up until about the next dawn, debriefing all of these people, saying, okay, what did you mean on this form? What did you mean here? And we would literally stay in a hotel room, and they'd come in, and we'd be with each observer for about an hour, okay? I'm only telling you this story so you understand I have watched a lot of elections. And the best system of election is filling out the little form on the paper, the oval, and putting it into something to count it that does not have a heartbeat, is not a human. Because hand-counted paper ballots are the favored choice of election of third world dictators. And Idi Amin, that was his method of election. You do not want human beings doing the tally. Because I have watched these people. The vote is clearly on X for Joe Smith, and the people doing the count say, oh, look, that's for Harriet Jones. And I'm standing there as a DOJ lawyer with no authority to change it, by the way. All I could do is write it down on the multicolored paper. And they would be flipping votes. You want to talk about flipping votes? Humans flip votes. Because I've watched it. And so I would rather put my faith in a neutral machine that wasn't born with original sin okay? That's the best method of election.
I'm about a quarter of an inch away from a Catholic voting machine joke that I'm not going to make. Okay, so people are concerned about the Dominion machines. There's no doubt about it. What does it take to get someone off the voter rolls?
Wow. CLE moment. Okay. There's an overlay of the National Voter Registration Act. It's the Federal Motor Voter Law of 1993. And in order to get somebody off the voter rolls, you have to do a lot. So let's go through some of the possibilities. Oh, wait, this is a great deposition story I just remembered. The Public Interest Legal Foundation was suing Starr County, Texas, Rio Grande Valley, bloated voter rolls. We found lots of dead people. We're in a deposition with the county election director. And one of my associates was doing the depo, but I was sitting right next to her. And I said, ask him if he went to the wake, would he take the person off the voter rolls? And she said, if you went to the wake, would you remove the person from the voter roll? And the answer, no. And I was a little surprised by that answer, actually. I thought he's opened up some fun doors. And I said to my associate, I said, ask him if he saw the corpse. Would he take him off the voter rolls? Now, surely the answer to this is yes, right? Like, I'm just getting greedy now. CLE moment here. And she goes, and she was very uncomfortable about the question, right? She didn't want to ask it. I was like, no, seriously, ask him if he saw the corpse, would he take him off the voter rolls? And she said, if you saw the corpse, would you take him off the voter rolls? No. And at this point, I thought this case is moving along in the right direction. When would you, and by the way, Texas law allows for this person to be taken off the voter rolls under a bunch of circumstances, including this. And when would you take them off the voter rolls? Well, when we got some kind of notice from the state, or maybe a death certificate. So someone has to walk into your office with a death certificate after you saw his corpse. Yeah. So that goes to your question, but that's how difficult it is to get people off the rolls in a lot of places. Because county election officials think they aren't allowed to do it, because they haven't read the law, right? So here's what has to happen under motor voter. If somebody doesn't vote for a long period of time, right, inactive voter, the county essentially has to do radar, ping, active radar with mail to this address, get a bounce back, and then you have to wait 2 federal cycles, right? Oh, trust me, it's way longer than that in practical terms. That's under federal law. You are not allowed to remove that person unless you do that. Now, if you're dead, that's different, but I just told you the story about even when they're dead, it's hard to get them off the rolls. And here's the other one. When you move to another state, there's nothing in federal law that requires the states to talk to each other. All it is an honor system, and that's why you saw some of those people up there from Bullhead City, Arizona, also voting in California. So it's not easy, but some states do it well, like Florida. Some states do it poorly, like where we are tonight.
Okay, I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions. One is, how can we get younger people to care about election integrity? And then, Christian, there are various questions, but the bottom line is, what are we going to do? What can we do to clean up this absurd mess? And what are the other groups maybe that you're working with to make this happen?
Right. Okay, young people, boy, that is a stumper, okay? I think, I mean, I can't explain it. I got to tell you, this is a seriously important question, and one that I've struggled with without coming to a clear answer. I think they grew up in a more cynical America. Remember I talked about how when I grew up and you saw 7 Rashawn Slades, nobody would be against fixing the problem. Like, you would be a weird outlier if you said, hey, who are you to say that, you know, like all of these weird reactions that come out of the media now. If you tried that in 1984, they might refer you for some examination or something. I mean, nobody would do that then. So I think they are growing up in a more cynical time. They've been bombarded with cultural messaging that people who care about election integrity are crackpots, okay? The culture is deep with them. And the culture of denial, voter fraud deniers, is deep with them. They haven't seen enough. They lack wisdom. So it's hard for them to smell when something's off, right? Oftentimes they're along for the ride more than they're behind the wheel. So I don't know the answer, and I think it's a problem because I've talked to so many crowds like this. I spoke to Cornell University Law School a couple weeks ago, and there were young people there that got it, but generally speaking, I don't think the young people get it, and they get bombarded by Stacey Abrams, right? And all of the culture, and told that these issues are fake, and I don't have an answer on that one. But you asked for something else.
What are we going to do?
What are you going to do? Right.
Give these people who are
Right.
really the truest patriots you'll ever find in Silicon Valley or anywhere else, give them one or two things they can do when they walk out the door tonight to
Right,
support
right.
your work.
Okay, the thing I always tell everybody, it's hard, it's no fun, but seriously, the most important thing you could do, just try it one time, is volunteer to work for the county on election day. Not an observer, but a poll worker. Now, people get confused. Like, I've observed, when you're an observer, you're the guy complaining about what you see. When you're a poll worker, you're the one deciding whether to do something about it. It's a power shift. Poll observers are complainers and memorializers of facts. Poll workers decide. They have power. And if the left knows anything, it knows how to get power. And it's a pain in the neck, believe me. But go to your county website and see if there's a place to sign up to be a poll worker. Just do it one time. Because I can tell you who's doing it in California. It's the SEIU. Okay? It's the Service Employees International Union who's running your polling sites. So unless you show up, anything can happen. And I certainly don't want those people not having friends in the room like you. So that's the first thing, is consider it. I know it's hard, and I know it's long. You might get paid here. I mean, you're not going to, get a ticket to London off it, but, it's something. The other thing is...
Something like a quarter tank of gas or something.
yeah, right. In other words, $500. No, I left a document I see some of you guys have called Protecting Your Vote. It gives you some basic information about sort of the battle space. The fact that you guys are here means you care, right? And I'm telling you, 15 years ago, if I or one of my friends came to talk about election process issues, this room would have been empty. But now you guys know how it matters, right? What happens in Arizona, what happens in Wisconsin and Atlanta matters here. So, I really applaud everybody for caring. What else to do? Holy moly, I've given you my best too.
Okay.
So,
Christian, thank you for such an informative, rich, meaty, interesting
thank you.
talk tonight.